Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. A little bit of a chaos at the beginning. We are not as disciplined as we thought, as people who are connected very intimately to the military. I'm extremely honored to have this panel on state defense in today's world. It is really a pleasure, and I was taken back by the biographies of my esteemed speakers. And I have decided not to introduce them because you have the biographies in your leaflets and in the program. When I was invited to speak or moderate this panel, the first thing that came to my mind was the digitalization of battlefield that we started doing 35, 40 years ago. We say that the Gulf War at the beginning of the 90s was either the last war of its era or the first one of a new one. We have moved tremendously from that time to this year, not only in our understanding of what digital technologies are, but also how to use them. At that time, back those 35 years ago, we thought connecting computers of the various defense or weapon systems would give us better understanding of where the enemy is, what they're doing, where our friendly forces are. We had no idea that by connecting these systems, we would create a new operational domain, cyber domain. We now have 5 operational domains. We fight in land or on land, sea, air, cyberspace, and outer space or space. Digital technologies play a huge role in all of them, not only inside, but also interconnecting these domains, which is both a huge opportunity, but also it poses some, I'd say, big or small challenges. Without further ado, allow me to introduce my distinguished panel. So we'll start from, what is it, right? František Schulz, who is the first Deputy Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic. Miles Yu, who has been on this stage several times already, who is the expert on China, if I may. Michal Křelina, who is our expert on quantum technology and their application in defense. And Francesco Cappelletti, who is the law or cyber law expert in this panel. Gentlemen, let me kick off by asking you a common question. If you could please spend 2 to 3 minutes answering what does digital technologies or digitalization and state defense mean to you and to your field of expertise? So if we can start again, making a round. Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's work? Yeah, it works. So good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, actually. So I have a lot of notes for this. I don't know if it will be 3 minutes or 30 minutes, so I will try to squeeze it into 3, actually. As we discussed it outside, actually, we are attending quite often to discuss the gadgets, software, tools, applications, and all that stuff. But I think that it's very important to look out from a strategic level, and looking for the effects, what I want to achieve. Let me just briefly sum up, if you're asking personally what it means for me, the digitalization. Let me just very briefly and quickly sum up the pros and cons of that, how I see that, and some remarks from, let's say, lessons learned from my previous and even now the job on the Ministry of Defense. Actually, you can look at that from different angles. It's really simple. It's positive for example, from the point of conducting the war. You mentioned the battlefield, of course. The positives are less fog of war, let's say, call it. Higher effectivity and flexibility for the forces. Accuracy could means advantage for the even weaker actor. And it has a huge impact on the training. It's really it's making it more intensive and it's better. Of course, there are negatives. Negatives such as vulnerabilities, not only intentional, for example, security breach, but also unintentional. For example, physics, weather conditions, etc., interrupting the communication. One of the things which could be really negative is the information overload, let's say. Our brains didn't develop as much in the past 100,000 years. So sometimes we think that we are totally different from the Homo sapiens 100 years ago, 100,000 years ago. And we are not, actually. It's just, if I may just one sketch from some latest research, that our brains are even smaller, for 12.7% than the brains of the Homo sapiens 100,000 years ago, actually. And what's happened? That time, the scientists think that that the humans switched from a more intuitive style of thinking to what he terms symbolic information processing, or thinking in a more abstract way to better understand your surroundings. But important is that it's happened 100,000 years ago, and the brain is not coping with the development in the same pace as we are sometimes expect. And another negatives could be too much dependency on technologies, actually, because really we cannot be without them. And what's important is from the point of implementation. So I will leave the battlefield, and from the point of implementation, which is quite important. I would say that first, there is a mental barrier. We discuss the digitalization as a revolutionary, but still thinking about it in a traditional way. I'm calling it something like hardware thinking. But we have to think about it differently, about the life cycle, for example, how to acquire it, how to design it, etc. Planning, another thing. Effective implementation means very deep and contextual analyzing and planning. We are still not good in that. Without fully integrated architecture, has the digitalization opposite than desired effect. So effect-based approach, as I mentioned at the beginning, is really needed. Always we have to weight desired effect with the effort which is needed to reach that effect, cost, personal, and changes in the organization. Third, integration, open versus proprietary, software, control of interface, etc., centric platforms, as we discussed it earlier. Security, it must be always priority, but it inevitably leads to trade-offs and lowering flexibility and rising the cost. Five, and I think that we're going to discuss it later, legal issues. That means man in the loop, man outside the loop, etc., etc. I will stop here, sorry. Slightly more than 3 minutes, but I just wanted to highlight some topics.
That's okay, thank you so much, I forgive you. Miles, could you please?
Okay, great. So I'm going to use my 3 minutes to highlight the digital defense is a major issue. Digital revolution has been fundamentally changing our way of conducting modern warfare. So I'm going to just briefly to illustrate this idea from the doctrinal level to the operational level. Doctrinally, it completely changed our way of appropriation and our procurement, basically budgetary concern. In a traditional sense, we talk about building up capabilities that basically focus on big guns, carriers, missiles, and those weapons are also very important. Of course, they're both the most determining factor in the outcome of the war. Nowadays, it's very different. When we talk about the most important factor that will determine the outcome of the war, it's cyber, space, undersea, big data, EMP. So all these areas are new domains. New domains are very different. They're all digitally based. And so that's why we have to seek the new opportunity. It's very hard for a big ship like the United States to change. And NATO also, we have to change very quickly. China, on the other hand, seeks this opportunity. They seize this, they know it. So they spend a lot of money on the new frontiers, new domains in modern warfare. So that's number one. Number two is the issue of command and control. Command and control is very important. Modern warfare is based upon very good of command and control. Now, initially, all this area that we talk about command and control is 2 C's, and then we added to C4 and ISR. That means command control, computer communications, and then intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Now it's very different. So it's a C5 and ISRT. So C5 means command control, communication, computer, and cyber. And then ISRT is, of course, is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting. So all of this right now has been elevated to a much higher level than before. So it's not just about the communication, not about intelligence. It actually plays the front row, right? So this will bring us to the next one, that is the issue of joint warfare. In the past, we normally, the ground forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force, and they're fighting different wars. They have their plan. They can single-handedly win over the enemies. But nowadays it's different. So joint is very important. Joint has to be done through digital, cyber, very important. As we exist right now, NATO and the US, we have these tremendous barriers. Each service has their own independence, has their different command chains. So that has to be done through a much more joint and digital-based right. Of course, digital age also brings new challenges to our traditional way of conducting warfare. One of them is that it's tremendously expanded the scope of operations from purely kinetic engagement to psychological warfare, to cognitive warfare, to disinformation. So it's all brand new world. It's a very, very challenging, exciting, and also threatening if we don't handle it very carefully. Now, another thing, finally, I would say, it really affected our, Mr. Minister, you mentioned about readiness and training. It has tremendously impacted our readiness training. Nowadays, so I teach at the institution called the United States Naval Academy, which trained officers. 10 years ago, I would give assignment to my students, mostly ask them to read articles and books. Nowadays, if I give them articles and books to read, they're going to scan them into a digital form to read it, because they're used to, their reading habit is completely changed, right? Now, what does that mean? That means that our modern warriors, they're feeling much more comfortable conducting warfare by pushing computer keys than pull the real triggers, let alone hand-to-hand combat, right? You see that in Ukrainian war right now, and there is this kind of a transitional effect going on. The soldiers not only go to the front line, pull the triggers, kill enemies, but also you're supposed to be able to operate the drones, right? And use in Starlink receivers. So it's a very, very profound change, and I think that modern warfare will have to change in those ways, and we have to be ready, and we're not right now.
Thank you so much, sir. You've both mentioned the importance of a human brain and human mind in even cognitive warfare, which is my favorite topic, so I'm really looking forward to exploring that more later on. Michal, your turn. Thank you.
Okay, so hello, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation and to be part of this very interesting panel. So, quantum. Quantum sounds scaring, maybe sci-fi. So how I will start, let's say, how to position quantum around the digitalization. Actually, quantum was at the beginning of all digitalization. You know, quantum mechanics in principle is older than 100 years, and it was especially developed before and during Second World War, nuclear weapons. Later it was semiconductors, which is that hardware heart of all modern digital technologies. But today with quantum, we are farther, and we are even speaking about quantum computers, quantum networks, quantum information. So how is it going along with digitalization? Probably some of you think about it as like something after digitalization, like, you know, in future there will be Star Trek or starships. Actually, it's not like that. Still, quantum information is very difficult for us to work naturally. We are happy, pretty classical information we are able to process. So I would call that quantum information or modern quantum science is, let's say, the next level of digitalization. I mentioned, for example, quantum computers. That's, let's say, the most famous quantum technology, and also for sure with the biggest hype. And it's also very close to defense, because you know, the first quantum computer was created like in 1998, and actually it was created thanks to the funding from American DARPA. You know, they support this R&D long time before it was because it was became, let's say, sexy word, quantum. So, and at the end, you know, quantum computer, how to imagine? A quantum computer is actually some kind of a physical experiment that is always controlled, read out and interpret by classical computers. So that what actually means that if you imagine that quantum computer in future will replace classical computers, it's actually pretty false imagine. They will be always at least together next to each other, and it's better actually imagine quantum computer more like a kind of accelerator, like you use GPS today for some kind of AI, for example, calculation. So quantum computer will be very good, but for some niche calculation specific. And the last comment, quantum is not only about quantum computing. There are also other, let's say, domains like quantum networks or even quantum sensors, whereas real and useful quantum computer is pretty far away, let's say 10, 15 years. At the other side, the quantum sensing, especially relevant for the defense, is pretty close. In laboratory, we see very excellent results, and already there are, let's say, done the tests in relevant environments, like on a boat, on planes. So it's approaching, and in sense of defense, it doesn't mean like it will come with fundamentally new weapon, like at the beginning quantum mechanics came with a nuclear bomb. In this sense, these quantum technologies are extremely fragile, so they rather like enhance capability, make like sharper our digital systems to, let's say, be more precise, be faster, and be more secure. Okay, and here I will finish at the moment.
Wonderful, thank you so much. That's a view into the and future technologies that are still awaiting us. What does international cyber law have to say about that?
Microphone doesn't work. Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be in this panel. I heard a lot of great ideas. Now my answer will be way more easy because I can build on top of it. So exploiting, this is part of, information warfare, exploiting information you already received. Jokes aside, the field of cybersecurity became quite complex because of, as you rightly said, all of you, expanded through other fields. Yes, it's called the fifth domain. I would love in future, and especially from a legal perspective, cybersecurity is being thought of as a critical infrastructure in itself, like securitizing cyberspace, securitizing our communication by design. That should be one of the goals for the future, in my opinion. And this is exactly as you were saying before, we were saying a strategic goal. Also because others are doing other's opponent. But before answering your question, like few characteristics that I think would be helpful for the audience if you're not used to these kind of discussions when it comes to the defense of cyberspace, and cyberspace as a fifth domain of warfare or confrontation or battlefield. It is quite the surface. It's quite bigger than any other domain, and that's the first issue with cyberspace, because what is cyberspace? Is a network of connected devices, people, machines, processor, people interacting with it. This is definition of NATO, more or less. So it also counts in the interaction that humans have with the machines, and therefore delivering packets, information according to a transmission protocol, which is the definition of internet. Now, when you think about the surface of it, you mentioned DARPA, you mentioned, so probably also remember of ARPANET. That's when internet was born in 1972 to connect different institutions of research with the Pentagon and other security institutions in the US with the purpose of sharing research information. And that's when the internet has been born, for delivering information. All good at the beginning. Actually, a few years later, Tim Berners-Lee in CERN in Geneva decided that it would be nice to have common libraries and therefore servers to share information also at academic level. And then www was invented, what we use today on our browsers. The first browsers were invented, so the human interface was invented, and cyberspace from research or closed network perspective became a must thing that became an unbelievable surface. We have about 6 billion out of how many we are now, 8 and something, that are connected. And per every person, there is at least 2 devices connected, so multiply this per 2 or 3. That's all the Internet of Things, your washing machines that you can control from the phone, wearables, smartwatch, smartphones, laptops, and whatever you can think of. So if you think this in terms of security, I don't want to step into the shoes of people that have better knowledge than me in this sense, but that's quite a big surface now to protect. It's theoretically eroding the space in terms of strategic and military perspective standpoint, because if you have land to protect, then you put borders, then you do like Poland is doing now, rightfully, while there are weapons in Belarus, and they are fortifying the border, and that's the response. With cyberspace, it's quite more difficult. Then another thing to compare this domain with the other warfare traditional domain is the speed in which attacks happen. Like moving an army, it's feasible, but it's not as fast as launching a cyber attack, right? A powerful cyber attack, highly skilled personnel, backed by a state, want to disrupt some financial system, then it's faster than moving an army. And costs are relatively smaller than building up defense systems, rockets. And that's just to add on top of what you say, just to make it a bit more understandable also for non-defense only perspective, but how big is this issue? On the law perspective, just one question that remains open in cyberspace, given the fact that everyone can enter cyberspace with good and bad intentions, is the issue of attribution. Right? Attribution is essential. Attribution is essential for an army official or a ministry to take decisions. Therefore, you have to be informed about what happened, and you have to be certainty. And that's how international law is built. Like you need, in order to hold someone accountable, you need attribution. And in cyberspace, this is sometimes very expensive, very difficult. Think of, and I conclude, one of the biggest moments in our history of the internet, where we understood that cyber conflicts, cyber warfare was an issue, cyber security and cyber incidents, is 2007 in Estonia, when basically, if you don't know the story, they moved the statue of a Soviet hero. They relocated it because Soviet Union was ended, and as a response, allegedly, group of hackers backed by Russian Federation started hitting the servers of many institutions and accomplishing what is in technical terms a denial of services. So basically shutting down many websites and servers, communication. I said allegedly because the final reports, official reports from NATO, I believe, but I'm not sure about it, but final reports on the incident say that despite highly probability, they cannot prove with certainty. Therefore, in legal terms, that's where we have a big gap with this surface and big amount of cyber connected elements, that the issue of attribution has to be tackled in these upcoming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I sort of knew that preparing questions for this panel was a completely useless exercise, that the discussion is going to be dynamic. So let me pick up of what I think was resonating in what you've all said. I like the fact that we are finding ourselves in eroding space, and that can be understood in many ways. Eroding space in that no longer can we divide the space in between civil and military. The war in Ukraine would be a great example of how the civilian population is helping using digital technology to the military, which is then very difficult to embrace it with any sort of international law, protecting the civilians or explaining the laws of war. Attribution, who is the bad guy? In cyberspace where there are no borders, we have very little idea whether this is a one single person or whether it's a single person backed by a state or a bunch of criminals that, and then saying we declare war on somebody where we have no idea or we have doubts of who's actually doing something is very difficult. In that sense, it seems to me that we are moving back to what was the case during Cold War, that the armed forces led the way in terms of technological development, and the context or concepts that are connected to it. Do you think, from your perspectives, that the armed forces are now in the lead, or should they be in the lead of setting precedent in the 21st century? And I'll start from the other way.
I'll be very quick on it. Actually, cyber capabilities, of course, are of most benefit with what was called during the Soviet Union times, so the bipolar world, superpowers, because having the capacity of being able to respond, to be resilient in case of cyber incidents, or to apply a framework for cyber security and resilience, of course, happening with a higher extent of success where the state is also wealthy, resilient in democratic and military terms. So yes, of course, there is an advantage in terms of capabilities, but I wouldn't focus only on the big confrontation, because there is a paradox here that we have to keep in mind. The United States are the best equipped country in the world when it comes to cyber capabilities, especially in cyber offensive capabilities. So theoretically, if we want to talk about balance of power, but I leave this to you to have fun on it, and deterrence, which is another issue which is problematic in cyberspace, because you need to know the capabilities of your adversary to do deterrence, so this is another issue. But despite being them the most capable in technical skills in cyber warfare scenarios, they are the most susceptible to cyber wars. Why so? Because we have to play all with the same game, game theory. So if we play for an open, safe, and available for everyone internet, we of course leave some doors open for malicious actors. And paradoxically, China, Russia, that have the technically capability of putting all their internet outside of what is internet connected domain in the world. So to elevate it on their own cloud, pass me the term, not to be too technical, gives them a strategic advantage in this sense. So yes, it's true that capabilities are important, but also let's think, I love to say, not fall in love with technology, because technology is neutral. It's the way you use technology that makes sense of it. And therefore I think what can be done at international level by partners is to create consensus, of course, on what are the rules, but at the same time strengthening capacity building in those nations that could be susceptible of cyber attacks. And this also technically speaking. So if some state is more capable, then have to try to help other states that are more susceptible in this sense. I don't know if I answer your question, but...
Okay, so I will have two comments. One from, let's say, quantum perspective. Regarding quantum, especially quantum computing, there is a lot of interest from defense and especially intelligence, because, let's say, future quantum computers will be able to break the present encryptions. That's a pretty big thing. Not only that they can, in principle, such a quantum computer will be there here like in 10 years. But it's threat already now because, for example, if over a network you are sending some secret information, let's say EU secret you need to keep like 30 years, but quantum computer will be in 10 years. And it's known about China that they already collecting this information, let's say public key and encrypted files, and in 10 years, let's say, they can decrypt your secret. So from this perspective, it's a threat already. We already have also some mitigation in form like quantum communication or post-quantum cryptography. So from this perspective, there is a lot of interest. For example, even NATO has own quantum technology strategies. So it's pretty strategical things in a long-term vision, but some kind of mitigation we should start already. My second comment, I will divert a little bit from quantum because I also have, let's say, some insight to Ukraine. And I think to say how much it's important or not is if you see in real conditions, in a real battlefield at Ukraine. So probably most of you heard about this artillery Uber from Ukraine that is extremely effective, and they use actually much less ammunition compared to Russian with a much higher effectivity. But there are opposite examples, like when Elon Musk shut down Starlink in particular areas. So it's extremely complicated, for example, some offensive operation by Ukraine. So it seems it's critical, even if they use, let's say, old weapon systems from Second World War, artillery. It seems that these digital technologies are anyway the core part of this battlefield, and it's showing importance at a real battlefield. And apart, of course, there is this gray zone around regarding hacking, attacking, and so on. That's let's say, different level of the same building.
Wonderful, thank you. Miles.
All right. Thank you. We say military, right? Military actually is a very inaccurate term. The proper designation of military should be National Defense Force. Right? If that's the case, national defense is the ultimate mission of any military. So you defend the nation, not only through a kinetic operation, but also in the case where cyber has been used, digital era has been used as a tool of war against your commercial interest, against your national interest. So in that sense, absolutely should be the mission, part of the mission of national defense forces, right? So Defense Department in the United States, for example, we do have a lot of those responses. The U.S. Navy, for example, has established a 10th fleet. That is basically, dealing with the cyber issue, dealing with many of these challenges. And we also have a new combatant command. It's called Cyber Command. Which this is one of the U.S. has now 11 combatant commands right now. Now that's 11th is a Cyber Command, which is huge. 25 minutes from where I live, so in Maryland. So yes, should definitely be part of the national defense military. Secondly, the military has been sort of at the sort of front line of developing military tools and benefit civilian life. One of the best examples is GPS. GPS is run by the U.S. Department of Defense. Everybody benefits from that. An airplane cannot really fly right now without that GPS guidance. And many other ways to do. I mean, the Uber, everything is rely on that. Of course, you have the you have some other competitors for that, but GPS is by far the best, right? So that's just one example. But I think right now, one of the major issues when it comes to, you mentioned about law, rules-based international wars have to be regulated by War Geneva Convention. We really need to have a international agreement, convention on cyber warfare. We don't have that. The only thing we have is about something called the Budapest Convention. That was right after, I believe, 1992, 93. It's about how to combat bank fraud, mostly, cyber crimes. At the time, I don't think it's called cyber. Basically, people try to, this is a big thing, right? So what is a cyber action? When is a cyber action is considered as an act of war, right? And in what way it should be legal or illegal, cyber actions in warfare, if cyber war is really a real thing. It is a real thing. So we do not have that. I think, the rule setting capability is the hallmark of the Western democracies. And I think, either EU, NATO, or United States, somebody has to take the lead to really, to have a international convention that is clear. It's clear. So that's something that we have yet to do it. It's a new domain, as I said earlier. It's a very challenging yet very exciting. Czech Republic is on the forefront of many of the cyber. I believe that during the Trump administration, we had one cyber meeting, either here or in Warsaw. But again, Eastern Europe has a great future in that. Take that lead.
Thank you so much. I hope that František will confirm your words that the Czech armed forces are indeed leading the way. We saw that in COVID, right? Many of the digital projects were supported by the Czech armed forces, right?
Yeah, yes, okay, before I switch to COVID, if I may. Your question actually, if I remember it well, was that should the military lead the research and development? Is that right? I would slightly modify that question because I would ask, can the military? And this is crucial. This can is crucial because really it's changed since the fall of the curtain wall, actually, when the world opened, thanks to the internet, ARPANET originally mentioned, and the exchange of knowledge, access to all the knowledge, which did one thing, speeded up the research and development. So we saw one of the quickest pace, actually, in research and development in the past dozens of years in history, I would say. But on the other hand, it inevitably led and leads still to the state is losing the control over the sensitive information, sensitive research, and development. Because look at that, it's a great example, is the Elon Musk and NASA. NASA led the private industry to run the space show, actually. And I'm really looking forward how they're going to get it back under the control when you will need it. I have my doubts, but I don't want to be a bad prophecy, to make a bad prophecy. So I think that we are still able to keep some research and development strictly under our control, under the control of the state, but we are, in that sense, we are, I would say, it's hard to say a percentage, but it's much more difficult to keep the pace. Because first you have to develop, research, develop, then implement. It lasts some time, and then to use it for some period of time. And that's hardware thinking. We still have in the defense domain, actually, that hardware thinking means that I'm buying the platform, and I'm buying it not for 10 years, not for 20 years, but usually for 30 years is a life cycle with some midlife upgrade. F-35, so I'm saying I'm buying for something like 35, 40 years, actually. So this hardware thinking is a barrier for keeping the pace and quick change in the sense of the cyber defense, etc. And if I may, and I'll just react a bit, I absolutely agree that we need some conventions, how to keep the warfare behind some fence, how to control the cyberspace, actually. But must be frank, we are mixing our wishes and the correct wishes, actually, with the reality. Our life is much more slower. That's the mentality. Our brains, our adaptability are much more slower than you would expect and you would want. Internet, let's say since 90s until now, it's how much, 35 years later, or 30 years later, we were not be able to fully found the convention or some legal measures how to globally control the internet. So now the cyberspace is something bigger. We are talking about the quantum technologies. It's absolutely, for 30 years we were unable to find the way how to control the internet, and we want to control something which is 2 levels above that. So I'm not saying that this ambition is bad, is wrong, but it's always important to have it in mind at the beginning. Where we are now, we are still on the beginning, 30 years after the internet, actually. So, and concerning COVID, the COVID was very important and great lessons learned, actually, for the Czech military, I must say. This is not the role to the military to create some agenda system for the whole state in the midst of some infectious, disaster, something how to call it. But the military took that responsibility when it was asked, the Czech military actually, and created very innovative and, let's say, simple applications which were lately absolutely correctly passed to the rights institutions, that mean hygienic institutions, it's called, But we learned a lot, and for example, the last year we slightly changed the act, so we now as a military, or military defense sector, or Ministry of Defense, we can access the agendas of the states. So we don't need at the moment to call up the guys to come to some spot and show them up, show their up, to know who they are, what's their name, where they are living, etc. So we are unable to check the population. And we are using, or the military is using actually, the knowledge from the development of that application from the COVID for the same purpose, to work in the agendas to get the data from there securely and look at that. So this is one of the examples when really as Czech Armed Forces and Czech MOD was like a step before the others. But I would say in other domains, for example, I mentioned the F-35s, is to look at it's 8 million lines of code, I think. So you're just buying it at the centric platform, trying to integrate it to other platforms, but you will not be able to develop it, implement it in a country such as Czech Republic. It's at the beginning of the 20s we were able to produce or manufacture fighter planes and bomber planes even, but they were wooden actually. But we are not able to do it. Sorry for the lengthy answer.
No. We're still contributing to the F-35s by designing some sort of a grid. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, this is, the cooperation of F-35 is there. I don't want to make it longer, but if you would be interested, it's the great example how, I remember when you start to discuss the F-35 and start to learn about that. It was first and bad impression. You can quite often read it in the papers, for example. This is not the fighter plane. This is not the fighter plane as we know it. This is something totally else, something totally new, and really you need to implement it and integrate it throughout all domains because it can cooperate. It's a joint. It's a joint twice, 3 times emphasis. No, but we can discuss it later.
Now, and I think, allow me to go back to something that we've discussed, and that's the centrality of a human mind, a human brain, to anything that we do. Digital, all that, but at the end of the day, we are pushing the buttons, right? Although we can discuss whether there is a need for the human operator to be there to push the button to shoot down a target or whatnot. If I may, I think war is, by definition, a human endeavor. No other creatures fight wars for no reason. Only we do, and we develop technologies, digital technologies, to make it easier for us to kill more other humans. I've read somewhere recently that it is not only the kinetic that is killing or destroying targets that is important at war, and I've heard it here from you, it's also the narrative. That is the story that we tell and we send through cyberspace that will, if not win completely, but help us win the future wars or even the current ones. Do you have any views on that? I'll start from the middle. Michal, do you want to?
Okay, so interesting topic. From quantum perspective, I guess I cannot say much. Maybe a few examples regarding narrative, because it's indeed important aspect, not only in the time of war, but let's say all the time, when especially the big countries, big nations want to, let's say, push forward their ideology. So for example, in case of quantum, because I'm trying to follow, let's say, everything quantum, especially in China, several times happened, they had very strong claims, like they develop a quantum radar. Quantum radar is something that theoretically can work, practically it cannot work. Anyway, they make several strong claims, like a message for the United States, like, hey, we have quantum radar, now your, that time it was just starting, F-35, the 5th generation jets, you can forget about them because with quantum radar they are not stealth anymore, we can see them. But today we know, or already